I went from 1400 to 2100 in just 2 months, and I'm gonna tell you exactly how I did it, so you can do the same thing. The only thing I cared about in these games were the weaknesses. A weakness is a square that is attacked more times than it is defended. And with that in mind, let's go into the first game. Alright, so now we have, of course, the same opening we have been playing this whole time. It works. When you find something that works for you, don't change it. It works. Keep using it. Improve it. Okay, so we develop our pieces all very nicely. We have a semi-slab defense, because the bishop is inside of the pawn chain. So we develop everything very pretty. We both castle, and I go queen to c2 in case he takes the knight on c3 with the bishop, which is what my opponent does. I take back, he goes knight to e4, attacking the queen. I go back with the queen, and then I go b3 to develop my bishop via b2. That's exactly what I do, and then I centralize my knight a little bit. Then he goes back with the knight to d7, so he just gifted me one tempo for free. He went forth, and then he went back, so that he didn't do anything. So of course I just keep developing. He takes the knight, I take back, and then I go bishop d3 to put a little bit of pressure on the knight on e4. He goes knight c5, and then I think I don't really want to lose this bishop to this boring knight, so I go back with the bishop. He develops his bishop, and then I go bishop a3, pinning the knight on c5. So if he moves, he will lose the rook on f8. Now he goes queen to g5, giving me the opportunity of creating a weakness in his position. How do I do that? First I take the knight, he takes back, doubling his pawns, and now I need to open this file. So of course I just take the pawn on d5 first, he takes back, and now I take the pawn on c5 for free. We're up a pawn. That's good. And then he attacks my queen. I get the queen out of danger and attack the bishop at the same time. That is the best type of defense, when you're defending but you're attacking something at the same time. So he defends the bishop, and this is a blunder. Pause the video if you want to try to find it, but I'm gonna tell you the move now. The move is rook takes c8 check, and he resigned in this position. I'm gonna tell you why. If you take back with the bishop, then the rook on b8 would fall. If you take back with the rook, then the bishop falls, so you are losing one piece right here. That was a very easy win. So now we move on to the second game. And now on the second game, we are facing a modern defense from my opponent. He goes g6 and bishop g7. We get the pieces out of the way, and we both castle at the same time. b3 to go bishop b2 with the same idea as before. He attacks the knight on c3. I go queen to c2, defending it, and then I go bishop b2. Now he goes knight to d7, and I take the pawn on d5. And if he takes back, he will be losing a pawn. So of course, he first takes the knight on c3, and I do something a little bit stupid here. I take the pawn on c6 first. He takes my bishop with a check, so I have to take care of this first. I don't take the knight, because the knight is actually trapped. It can't move anywhere else. So I move the king first. Then he takes back. I take on c6 with a tempo on the rook. He goes knight to b6, defending the rook, and then when I go back to attack the knight, I realize that he can just go bishop to a6, defending it. And now I'm down 2 pieces. I might as well resign here, but then I think a little bit more, and this guy is not Magnus Carlsen. He's not Hikaru Nakamura. He's not even a grandmaster, so he might as well blunder during the game at some point. I don't know, but I'm gonna try. I'm not gonna resign. So I go rook to e1 first, trying to take the knight with the rook at least. Then he attacks my queen. I go queen to d2, and then I just take the knight. Of course, he takes back, and then I take. He goes pawn to e4. I don't want to go knight to e5, but that's kind of the only move that makes sense to stay on the game, so I go knight to e5. Of course he takes. He wants to exchange absolutely everything. That's why he goes queen to d3 next. I don't want to exchange absolutely anything. I have to stay on the game. I have to keep some pieces on the board. So I go queen to e1. He attacks my bishop. I go bishop to d4, blocking the d file, centralizing my bishop. All very good. He goes queen to e2, and I'm really thinking about resigning at this point. He's going for checkmate. There's not a lot for me to do, but I want to keep going. I'm praying that this guy will blunder something at some point. So I go queen to a5. He takes the pawn on f2. Of course, I have to go rook to g1 to stop the checkmate on g2. And now he goes back with queen. He wants to keep trying to exchange pieces, but I don't want that. So I take the pawn on a7. Then he goes rook to c6, blundering one piece. The knight is only defended by the rook, and it is attacked by the bishop and by the queen. That's a free piece. But when you find a good move, you have to try and find something better. Never settle for something good. Go for something better. So I go pawn to e6. What the hell does that do? Well, I'm threatening checkmate in one move on g7 with the queen, because the queen is defended by the bishop. And the top move here from the engine is giving away your queen. You have to take the bishop. So he blunders something a lot more serious than the knight. He's in real trouble now. So he goes knight to d7. And I just take that with the queen. And he resigns. This is game over. You have to take the bishop on d4 with the queen. There's nothing for you to do here. Never resign your games. Your opponent is not a master, most likely. So there's a very big chance that they will blunder. You have to be patient and push them to the edge until they just fall. And now we move on to the third game. And now on the third game, we're playing something that looks a little bit like a King's Indian defense, and I'm not really comfortable in those type of positions, so I really try to avoid them. So I don't go pawn to e4. Instead, I go pawn to e3. Don't play something you're not comfortable with. Just play what feels right to you, as long as you're not blundering anything. He goes pawn to c5, I just push my pawn, and we both go towards the castling. And now he went knight to d7, taking away the escape square of the bishop, so I go knight to h4, attacking that bishop. He goes pawn to a6, giving me the opportunity of creating a weakness in his position. Of course, I just take the bishop, he takes back, and as soon as you see a weakness, drop everything and just go for it. Okay, I go queen to d3, attacking the weakness. He defends the weakness with the pawn. However, anytime you push one of your pawns, you create another weakness. Of course, when he pushes this pawn, now the pawn is not defending the pawn on d6 anymore. So I take that one first. He doesn't take back. First he goes knight to e5 with an intermediate move, attacking my queen. But the problem is, I also know how intermediate moves work. So I take the pawn on f7 first with a check. When he takes back, there's a weakness in the position. Of course, I see it, I love it, I like it, and I take it. Then he moves the knight, attacking my queen with the rook. Of course, I get my queen out of danger, but being active at the same time. I go queen to e6, pinning the rook. He goes queen to f8. I go bishop h5, still attacking the rook. And now we have knight to g6, and you know what? That's a free pawn. I'm gonna take it. Bishop takes g6, pawn takes, and I take back. Then he attacks my queen. I bring my queen back, and he wants to go for the weakness on c4. But you know what? You can just take the pawn. I'm going to take your rook. Knight to d5, and there's a trick here. If he goes rook to f5, that looks like a very natural move, attacking my queen. There's knight to e7 with a double check, and I will be winning a piece. So he doesn't go for that. Instead, he just takes the knight. I take back with the queen, and that is a check. Has to move the king out of the way, and he goes to the 7th file, so I take the pawn on b7, so he can't move the bishop, and then I slowly develop my bishop. He brings the rook into the game, I bring my rook into the game, attacks my queen, I go back, and then he goes queen to f3, threatening checkmate in one move. Of course, the only move is pawn to g3. Then he takes the bishop, I take back. He goes rook to f7, so I cannot move my f rook anymore. I pin his rook on g6, so he can't move that rook either. And then he walks out of the pin. I centralize my rook a little bit, and then when he moves the rook out of the f file, I go queen to f5, asking for some exchanges. Of course, he's not interested in that. And then I go with a check, winning the weakness on d6. But instead of taking my rook, he walks into a checkmate. He boxes his king behind the rooks. So I just go rook to d7, he goes back with the king, and queen to f8, my opponent resigned. There's nothing to do here. The only thing you can do is block it with the rook, but then this rook would be undefended, and that would be a checkmate. Just a little reminder, I gained 700 points in 60 days. No opening theories, no books, no videos, no nothing. Just asking myself after every single move, is there a weakness in this position? And if there is, just go for it. Try it in your games, and you will see a massive change. Part 6 is coming up tomorrow, so subscribe and turn on the notifications, and I will see you in the next game.